Welcome to The Prepared Leader, From Crisis to Confidence, the podcast for leaders who know that tough times aren't a matter of if, but when. I'm Helen Lipscomb, and each month we explore bold strategies, real-world stories, and practical insights to help you lead with clarity, confidence, and resilience. Today, we are exploring one of the biggest forces reshaping leadership and resilience and the world of work at large, artificial intelligence. I'm joined by Mary Kemp, co-founder of Brighton AI, an organisation bringing together people, ethics and innovation to shape how we use AI responsibly and creatively. And we're going to talk about what AI means for leadership, decision-making and resilience, and how humans and machines can thrive side by side. Mary, really pleased that you can join us on The Prepared Leader today. I'm really excited about this conversation because AI is a thing that I think a lot of us know a little bit about. Some of us are trying to learn lots more about it, but I think it's something that is just, it's not crept up on us, but maybe has a little bit. So I'm excited just to talk a little bit more about that. And it'd be really just helpful, I guess, from your side, because I know you founded Brighton AI to help organizations really understand what does AI mean and some of the real world implications. What made you think this is what we need right now? And what is it you're trying to achieve at Brighton AI?
Absolutely. So I kind of wear two hats. So there's Brighton AI, which is an amazing community group that's come together under Silicon Brighton. If any of you are listening to this and you're local to Brighton, then check out Silicon Brighton because it's incredible. It's a massive digital community. So that's kind of my community hat. And in my commercial hat, I am the CEO and co-founder of AI Potential, which is our commercial hat that we wear. So we go out and do a lot in all those kind of communities. And we had our AI awakening, I suppose, in March 2023. So we pivoted, not an AI native by any means. We've had our own company for like decades. I don't want to count up how many years. And our focus was business development. So we were experts in business development for large corporate American companies. And one of those pieces of work was a deep dive into an ideal avatar or an ideal client persona. And it would usually take the team 4 to 6 weeks, and we'd have to talk to real CEOs and everything. But if we did our job well, it would then bring on clients like we did for our clients like Spotify and Etsy and Lauren Perrier and things like that. And at that point, even back then, chat did that piece of work in under an hour. And the scariest bit was it was better than us. Now, at that point, we assumed that anyone with a chat subscription could replicate all of our experience. So we felt pretty sorry for ourselves and then thought, okay, so we have a choice. We can sit here and wait to be disrupted, or we can pivot and help others navigate it. And that's what we did. We pivoted overnight, signed off with our last American contract on October the 15th, 2023. We kind of assumed that those companies would come with us. We'd had long-standing relationships with them. Some of them are quite good friends of ours. And I can say, 2.5 years later, they're still in the process of coming with us. So the larger the organization, the slower the shift, which meant that we were officially a startup. And so we embedded ourselves really quickly in the Brighton community. We've been growing and evolving from there. So it was an interesting journey. I wouldn't change any of it. I don't think we had any idea what we were setting ourselves up for. Anyone who says that they're an AI expert, be frightened, because you can't be. It's just so big and so fast moving. You just need to be ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I'm fascinated by, I guess, your experience of some of those organizations, because I think that almost comes to the first, I think, question that often comes up, which is, that kind of fear factor of what is this AI and what is the right way of using it, I guess, to some extent. And do you find that that's where some of the misunderstanding has come, that maybe people aren't, again, it's a thing that we understand, but we also don't understand. And as somebody that does use AI, I fully say that, I understand bits of it. I don't understand it well enough, but I'm trying to learn. What do you think people most misunderstand about AI?
That's a really good question. So I'm going to talk about it from a business level and then an individual level. So from a
Mm,
business level, it's all about risk. They're really worried about governance and responsible use.
yeah.
So at a really basic level, there's some businesses that think that if any of their data gets into the machine, then that's it. Their proprietary information is lost. They're not quite sure how that works. So because it's so complex and overwhelming, what will happen is they wait. So it's that risk piece. What they may not fully understand is that as long as, so for example, most of the large organizations, in fact, 100% of them use Microsoft. So if you're a Microsoft organization and you use your Microsoft login to use Copilot, even if it's free, your data is still secure. So
Okay.
it's just that kind of basic thing. And so there's kind of two things. There's external data being insecure, but for the larger organizations that use shared drives and SharePoint and things like that, the other concern is that the data is only as good as one permission. So if a manager hasn't put the permission on the right file, AI can find that information where a human never would. And so for the majority of it, it's around, and this is maybe a wider conversation around
Mm,
pay and levels and things like that, because
mm,
employers have done a really good job of making everyone scared of talking about earnings, whereas you could just ask AI to go and find out everyone's earnings, and I'm sure people have done that, um,
yes.
because you'd never find it as a human, but AI you can get off. So it's that internal data structure. So I will talk to large organizations, and the first step isn't AI. The first step is getting their data infrastructure sorted, and then they'll release the AI. So there's that kind of leadership level. The larger the organization, the more worried they are about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the individual level. And I think there's two layers there. One is that AI is coming for my job. So
Mm-hmm.
we hear that a lot. And I can say AI isn't. People using AI are.
Yeah.
It's a skill, it's a future of work. And then
Mm-hmm.
as we go further up the tree in experience, so leadership, C-suite, that kind of thing, for them, it's an existential thing. They feel out of their depth because they've worked their whole career to be ahead, so of all of their team, they're the ones that they'll come to with the answers. And suddenly this new thing's been thrown into the mix that they are experiencing at the same time as everyone else. They feel out of their depth. And also because of their position, they can't go and talk, so from their perspective, they should know everything and have all the
Yeah.
answers. And now
Yeah.
suddenly they're in the same boat as everyone else, and they're expected to lead a team with AI when they're starting at the same level as everyone else. So it can create a lot of discomfort.
Mm. And in both cases, both at the leadership, so the organization and in the individual, that's kind of what was, as I was listening to what you're saying, that's a lot of what you're doing about. It's both about transparency.
Yeah.
Suddenly there is a concern that data is just available, and to some extent without the right controls in place it is, because now you have anybody can put any prompts in, and the right set of prompts, if that information is accessible, means you'll get that data. And so that's one element. And then I get like that uncertainty piece, and then I think that's where I've certainly had conversations with individuals that I'm working with, because I think there is that sense of, one, it's a level playing field, we're all learning this together, but there is also the other side of that, and it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on that. AI doesn't do some of the critical thinking that we would do, which I guess is back to your point of, this isn't, AI isn't coming for your job, but where this is, where you may find yourself out of a job is if you're not learning to use AI to do some of that initial thinking to then apply some of that critical thinking. And is that kind of how you would approach this? I think that's one of the challenges that I've heard a few times. And extending that on is, then how do you maintain that skill set of critical thinking to provide some of the, I guess, the challenge, or just provide some of that rigor that we expect, and come back to, that's the role of leadership to
Yeah.
some extent. So how do they maintain that skill set so they can add value in the workplace?
There's a huge amount in there, and I think it's really important to just kind of fundamentally remember that AI works for us and not the other way around.
Hmm.
So I think fundamentally, we need to get our heads around the fact that Gen AI is a skill and not a tool. And just like any skill, it takes practice and curiosity and having that beginner's thinking. Because if you transfer Google skills to AI, they won't fly.
Yeah.
So the other thing to know is that all of the experience that people have, um, completely alters how they use AI. So for us, when we pivoted our business, we assumed that anyone with a $20 subscription can replicate 20 years worth of experience. What we now know is that we can only get the output that we got because we're leasing it with 20 years worth of experience. So we knew the questions to ask, we
Hmm.
knew how to interrogate the data, and we knew where we wanted to take it. So nobody else could have got that result. So people, the more experience you've got, the better you can lead the machine. So people at mid to late stage career will get the best from it, because if you're an intern and you got that, you would think it looked great, but you'd have nothing to compare it with.
Yeah.
So AI is fantastic at plausible nonsense. So if you're an area expert, you're in a position to be able to really excel with it, because it will work with you as a thought partner, as a strategic partner, as well as a task manager.
Mm.
So actually, all the experience that you've got really matters.
Yeah. I really like that, because I think that almost, that's an element of how do you start to use this responsibly, and I think it does almost come back again to your point about, where does the role of leaders in organizations sit. They continue to provide that rigor, they
Absolutely.
continue to provide that challenge, and but they can do that to something that then can think a lot faster. And it's
Yes.
not that, to me, is the huge value add of this is, you know, the questions you want to ask, you know what the answers are to some extent,
Yeah.
because then, particularly if you have done this for a number of years, you have that experience. It's just, I don't have the time to spend 2 years doing this, or even 2 weeks doing this. If I put the right information, the right questions, know roughly what the output should look like, that just means I've got one thing to review rather than a load of things to review. I think that almost, to me, starts to get it into, that's some of the, I guess, considerations that organizations need to be thinking about. Again, using it, but using it responsibly,
Yes.
having the right controls in place, and having that right framework for where it gets used. Do you find organizations are starting to think like that as you're dealing
They
with them?
are. Yeah. And when we go and speak to them, they get it, because essentially, um, so this is not a tech problem. This is a people problem. And as soon as organizations and leaders realize that, it's nothing to do with tech. And the whole thing with this is that you're just using natural language.
Hmm.
So that is it. So the barrier to entry is actually not the tech. It's whether you believe you can or believe you can't. You're totally right.
Mm.
So it's a mindset shift. It's creating psychological safety. So people know the rules of engagement. They know as a team what the leader is comfortable with, what the organization is comfortable with, what's the level of transparency. It's all of that kind of thing that will accelerate an organization, not how many tools they have at their fingertips, or how, even how much training they go on. It's all about the culture of the organization.
Mm.
It's an innovation, and we're all innovating together for like the first time ever, I think, as a business.
Mm.
So it's uncharted territory, but that means you keep your people closer.
Mm. Yeah.
That's the focus. That's the lens to look at this through.
And everything you just said, that's exactly where my head went when you first started talking about that kind of, I guess, the transparency fact, and what is it you need to put in place to make this work, because a lot of it is about mindset, and a lot of it is about that giving people the safety to
Yeah.
say, we want you to use this, but we want you to use it in a responsible way. We believe that it can add value. We believe that there is, again, it's that element of, this will speed up our processes, will make us more efficient. But there are these steps that we think we need to follow to make sure that we are verifying the information, and we are verifying how this works.
Absolutely.
And I get a lot of that exactly where you are. And I spend a lot of time thinking about culture. It is around the environment much more than the tool or the process. It is much more about how do people feel, what level of comfort are they being asked, or not level of comfort, it's kind of what level of empowerment are they being given to use this, to try this, to help challenge some of the, I guess, perceived issues with it, and how that's kind of reshaping an organization and reshaping the culture. Is that again something that you find, well, you said that's kind of a lot of what this is about. Do you find that when you're talking to organizations, they understand it in that way, or are they thinking it much more from it's a tool?
They are usually, the vast majority are, it's a tool. But as soon as we talk to them, they get it straight away. These are all the companies that we work with do people over profit. So we know for organizations that focus on their people, that have a diverse workforce, that actually they're more profitable anyway. So, so it's and it's really interesting. There's so many different ways that organizations are doing things. As soon as they invest in their people, everything unlocks. So as soon as they come to it from that mindset, and I think the key word is investment. AI should never be a cost. You should be able to tie it to ROI in some way. And that's why a lot of AI implementation, actually, MIT released a study, must be 2 months ago, just kind of showing, we knew that AI implementation fails about 75% of the time. The MIT study showed it failed 95% of the time.
Wow.
And that was purely because they weren't talking about AI adoption. What they were talking about is results. So I'm calling it the disappointment cycle. Businesses have been through the disappointment cycle. So they had AI come along and they're like, this is going to transform everything we do. Businesses lent in, and 18 months to 2 years later, it's made some change, but nothing that was promised. And that's because they're not testing, tracking, and measuring. So they are kind of going, here, everyone, here's a Copilot account, here's some training, let's go off and do it. They're not actually seeing where it's being used, what the impact is it actually saving time? And if that time's being saved, what other great things are we using it for? So that's an area where we'll come in and shine a light. And happy to talk through businesses through how they track that. And that's what the study found, actually, that it was the hidden use cases that were actually going to unlock everything. So not copy and emails and things. It was all of the back end stuff, the routine stuff that's done all the time, that's just perfect for workflows and AI use. And that was what was really unlocking. But because it's hidden and hadn't been identified, it's not something that was being done in organizations. So, right now, that's the biggest unlocker that an organization could do.
It came to me as you were talking about that, it's like that being much more systematic in how you're applying it. Like it's as with any innovation, generally organizations or individuals are very scattergun about it. It's like, oh great, let's try lots of different things. And yes, like you say, the visible side is, oh, it can rewrite our emails, it can do this, but that is a minor level. I've recently used it, and this is probably still not really using it, but I've recently used it to kind of do some time planning for the next up until Christmas, because I was just like, there's a lot going on. I just need a bit of a structure, and give me this is what I need to look at what I've got committed, and it's almost that element of, I'm thinking about stopping these things, I'm thinking about doing these things, help me to sort of review this, and am I being a bit OTT, or actually is this what I need to do? And to me, it's probably, again, not in any stretch going to the lengths you could do, but it did give me some very clear outcomes, and did almost that a little bit of reassurance of, yes, you are right, you do need to be focused, you do need to do a bit less in the next few weeks, and things will be fine as long as you kind of have a plan, and you keep your plan, and you review your plan. So to me, I found that helpful. The email thing, that is just, it's just to some extent a bit lazy use of AI, because it's just writing some words together. We can all do that quite easily. So it does kind of strike me that some of this, and what really intrigued me, and when you talked about what really resonated, that whole unlock of people, what similar to what you're doing, a lot of what I'm trying to do with organizations about resilience is improve the way people work and people
Yeah.
talk to each other, and that mindset thing. And it's so similar in terms of the approaches and the challenges. And I think that's just it is a little, again, this is all about getting organizations to work differently. And
Yes.
that's partly what it's about. And that does come from the culture. It does come from leadership as well, feeling like this is a positive thing to do. And that's where I agree that kind of return on investment is a really important thing, because that's where you are going to engage leadership. If they can see that this is adding value, not just, oh, great, somebody's got a new avatar that they've created with AI. That's lovely, but it doesn't actually improve what we're doing. It doesn't actually change the way we're doing things as a business, which I think is interesting. Fun to do that, but it is interesting. What do you think are the kind of, for leaders thinking about this, what are the sort of skills that they should be trying to foster, either themselves or in their organizations, that can help, I guess, better adoption of AI?
So I think being curious, but there's two simple things they need to do, because most people are doing DIY AI. They're in their own silos. They're doing their own thing. That knowledge is not being shared across organizations.
Mhm.
So they need a prompt library. It doesn't need to be fancy. It can be a Word doc, a spreadsheet, a wiki, whatever you want, but just a central repository for knowledge. So they're starting to share what the prompts that sales might use and have found have worked the best, and what ops are using and what HR are using, so that we're giving people examples and frameworks, and then they can improve them and they become the gold standard. So you can start using those prompts to map out their processes. So you're magnifying that across the whole organization, rather than having one person that's a champion that's doing amazing stuff, but nobody knows what they're doing. So there's that side of things. And then you need an AI meetup or an AI huddle, half an hour once a week or once a fortnight max, where it's just open and everyone comes and talks about what's working, what's not working, what they found out. Maybe this bright new shiny tool that they've uncovered, but you're keeping that conversation top of mind. And as an organization, you're then signaling to everyone that this is important and it's on our agenda. And you can gamify it if you want to, pizza for prompts, whatever you like, but just that you're setting that really clear public intention that you're investing time and focus into this key area, so everyone knows it's on the agenda.
Again, fantastic ideas, because it's all about getting that right engagement. I really like the prompt library as well, just because I think that's what I find most individuals that I talk to about this are struggling with, is back to where you said, this is not about Googling. And we've only really just learned how to appropriately Google to find what we want to do and to know what the right set of words are that you need to put into there. Now it's sort of relearning or learning a new set of languages about what are the right prompts. And I think, as with anything, the more we can share this, the more we can improve it. And the more we can learn from each other and learn, why did that work? Why didn't that work? What advantage has that given you in terms of getting information, or where did you see the challenges? I think that's a really important thing. Again, just learning from each other. It's that concept of not having silos. As soon as you said that, I sort of slightly inwardly sighed, or possibly externally sighed, because it's the constant challenge of when you, and I can see it very much so in the AI world of, some people are like, yeah, great, I'm going to go and work with AI and I'm going to really use it and I'm going to make it the way I run either my part of the business, or we're going to think about it. Copilot exists for a lot of organizations, so some people will be starting to use that. But again, if there isn't a consistent strategy, if there isn't a sort of that check and balance of, okay, so how are you using it? How is it adding value? Then it just becomes the new shiny thing that we're all doing for a bit, until organizations then move away from it, because actually it's not adding value, which is back to your 90% fail rate. It's not that they're not using AI, it's just they're not finding the value of AI, which seems very sad to some extent. How are you seeing it being used well?
Really a great question, actually. So we're seeing it used well. So there's organizations that we're working with, and there's one lovely one actually in the health industry that actually never really did a full digital transformation. So we're skipping digital transformation. We're going from a lot of paper-based actually to AI-based, and which is a big leap, but they're like, we've got to leap anyway, so let's do it. So got to take my hat off to leadership there, that they were just like, it's going to be a tough journey anyway, so let's just lean in now.
Yeah.
They're about 200 people, so they're quite agile, but yes, very kind of old school. So what you want to do with any organization is show what good looks like. So in that, you can't go around to everyone and say, right, you have to do AI. But what you can do is go around and go, Joe used one of the tools, and actually that piece of work that you hate doing, she was able to do in 10 minutes, not 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of, and then she was able to move on to the next task so that she didn't feel overwhelmed at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, we really need to start, what's in it for me? So what we're doing there is identifying the highest priority use cases, but not the most complex. So what businesses often do when they think about AI is they get really excited about all the possibilities, and they come up with their big, hairiest, multifactorist problem, and then go, like, we're going to throw AI at this. Now, they absolutely can. Generally, what you want is something a bit more discreet to start with, where it's
Mm-hmm.
very less moving parts, easy to see the outcome so that you build confidence. Because at every point when people are touching AI, you want it to be a wow, not a
Mm-hmm.
So you need to set it up so that everyone gets this did deliver. It might not have delivered exactly what we thought, but it still delivered massive results, and we can see how we can apply it in other places. So for them, what we're doing is we've identified, these use cases, and we're bringing together across the organization everyone that touches it. So, which is great because it will cut right across from the leadership down to the bottom, everyone that touches it. And then we're teaching them, we're transferring the AI skills so that they're able to solve that problem themselves. And then we're testing and measuring the outcome. So what is the task? How long did it take you? How long did it used to take you? So we can show time saved, but then more importantly, was the output equivalent or better than you? And how did you feel about it? So really simple, but capturing all of that kind of critical information, so we can actually show that in this instance, they were able to do that scientific validation task 50 times faster. And that's just kind of, so it's quite standard for AI to do it at least 10 times faster. That's kind of the lowest bar. You generally expect, once you've got all your prompt chain working, which is a workflow, to do it 100 times faster. And then, once you've tested and measured it, you would expect maybe someone more junior to be able to run that. And then they would take it for sign off to the higher level leader. So you're able to redistribute that work completely.
Really like the kind of almost that start small, because I think there is a tendency again with something like AI where people are like, all right, we've got this really complex problem, and that's where AI can help us. And to exactly what you said, like actually part of this is start small, get it working, and learn as you go. Because if you throw it the horrible complex thing, the reason you're throwing it the horrible complex thing is because we can't deal with that.
Yes.
So you're setting it up to fail. You're setting it up to potentially come up with an answer, but we know that it might not be the right answer. And we can't challenge that answer because, again, it's that problem that we've had sat over, probably over here going, it's too big for us to deal with. So, oh, right, we've got this supercomputer over here. That must be what they do. Yet, if we build from those smaller things, again, we're learning as we do it. So we know, back to the prompt library, anyone that uses AI will know it really does matter what you ask, and you have to learn each time. If I ask this question, okay, that's not the answer I was expecting. So what have I asked wrong? How do I ask this question better? And I think starting with those smaller things, you can really easily measure it's worked or it hasn't worked, and you can build up from there. And I think, again, that's just back to some of the concepts I'd be talking about, is this, you don't want to bite everything off at the same time. Organizations can't deal with that, never mind the technologies that you're using, and never mind the culture you're trying to build around this. It just the tendency to break is so much greater.
Yes.
And somebody at somewhere will break. It might not be us, it might not be the tool, but something will go wrong.
Yeah.
And then again, human nature says at that point, then we will abandon it all until someone comes back to us and goes, oh, actually, you did that a bit too fast and far at the first step. Let's start small. And again, it's the same concept when I'm talking to organizations about resilience. Often when I go into organizations, the reason it hasn't worked is because they've tried to do too much too fast.
Yes.
And it comes back to, let's break it down, let's make it work, let's actually make it something that's achievable, that we can start to measure, that we can start to see the value. That then gets the buy-in, that then gets the engagement, that then gets the conversations going in the right way to change the mindset. Yeah, again, just resonates with me so much about the same challenges again and again and again that we're dealing with.
And I think you're right. I think, forget about AI. This is the same, just look at it through the human lens, and then AI comes in. So AI might be new, but navigating change is not.
Yeah.
And people aren't scared of AI, they're scared of uncertainty. That's what
True.
makes them feel uncomfortable. So you've got to that, and that's where they are. And
Yeah.
I think you were talking about it, like, we don't even know what's possible. It's overwhelming. We don't know where to start. So these smaller experiments opens up their eyes as to what's possible, and then they can see other targets that they might not have ever realized it could help with, because now they're starting to upskill and they're starting to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that, those use cases of, okay, so I can use it for this. And how many times have we sat through those conversations where you say that to somebody, you demonstrate the value, and then somebody goes, oh, okay, so if you can do it for that, I've got this other thing over here, not massively bigger, but actually, could we then start to look at it for that? So it grows from there with a positive mindset, with the reinforcement of, this is something that we can see will add value, as opposed to, this is something that we do feel really uncertain about. Because again, I agree, it comes back to that uncertainty and that change, and a lot of all of both of the topics that you and I work in, a lot of that is we're managing change.
Yeah.
The reason for managing change is because we're trying to implement new ways of thinking, but it is change management, and it's how to do that in an appropriate way, and how to help people navigate through those challenging times that anyone that knows the change cycle will be very familiar with. It's exactly that cycle that we go through, and every time it doesn't work, you're resetting that cycle, and that then obviously creates its own challenges.
Yeah, we're in the valley of despair with AI at the moment.
Yes. Yeah.
As we come down the other side. Gosh, it's really exciting. And then it's not doing quite what we thought it is. Okay, so what are we going to do now?
Yeah, how do we get us back in the right direction? And a lot of that comes down to, I think, keeping it simple and building on proven approaches, rather than, again, trying to boil the ocean to some extent.
Yes.
We don't want to be doing that. So yes, fantastic. So I feel like we could continue to talk about this, but I'm also conscious that we are coming towards the end of the time. As we start to wrap up, what's the kind of one core message that you'd be thinking about, that you'd want to give leaders around AI, and how they can use this to help their organizations, and how this helps them almost become more resilient as organizations?
So I tell them they're not behind. It feels like every person and their dog is all over AI and ahead of you, and I can tell you they aren't. And actually, we do a lot of work kind of at the policy level with government, and the latest stats from them are 34% of organizations are using AI. And I would say we all agree that that's probably over-reported, and they're not doing it in any systemic way. So if you're listening to this, you are not behind. You're okay. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So all you need is curiosity. So play. And if you're not comfortable doing it with work, because there's a bit of skin in the game there, then play with it outside of work. So with ChatGPT, 70% of the usage is personal. So kind of get used to it, use it outside of work in areas in which you don't feel that are as risky. so that you start to boot up the skill. And basically just think of it as as a virtual human, and talk to it as such. So, hey, I was thinking that I needed to do this task. Is there any way you could help me? Even simple stuff like, what question, I'm going to do a go-to-market strategy. What question should I ask you to help me do that? Because AI will write the prompt for you. And a prompt is just a question. So all you're doing is asking a question. So it's all about curiosity, actually, and just playing. So it's kind of living in the I wonder if zone. I wonder if it could help me with this. I wonder
Yes.
if it has any resources around that. You cannot break anything. You're on a secure system. If you're logged in on Copilot or any of those kind of ones, nobody will know what you've asked or said. None of the data goes back to the organization. It is a completely safe place for you to be a total beginner.
Brilliant. I really like that. I think you're right, just playing with it, and also asking it questions that it has to answer with a question to some extent is a really good way of you learning, okay, what is it I need to tell you? I often spend a lot of time saying, I'm trying to do this. What do you need from me? Because I think that's,
Yes.
and again, another way of kind of getting them to think about it.
Yeah,
So
drown it in context. The more context you give it, the better.
yes, exactly. Fantastic. And how can the listeners connect with you and learn a bit more about the work you're doing with
I
organizations?
would always love to connect with them, and if they tell me that they've come through you, then they get special treatment. So you can find me at AI Potential. I am on LinkedIn, or my email address is mary@aipotential.ai. So feel free to reach out. We do a lot of work, and we do a lot of work for not-for-profits as well, and support them and give our time, because it makes us feel good that we can help them do more with less. So anyone that's curious, by all means, come and stalk me on LinkedIn.
Lovely. And we will add the details to the show notes as well, so people will get that when it goes out. Brilliant. Thank you again, Mary, for joining me on today's Prepared Leader. This is a fascinating conversation that definitely could have gone longer, and maybe we'll talk more again about the different elements. If you found this episode valuable, please follow, rate, and share it with someone who's leading through change and curious about the future of AI. Until next time, stay ready and stay resilient.